From our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics.
A rare occurrence could happen in the coming days as two tropical storms are headed for the Gulf of Mexico, both Marco and Laura. And Laura's track is shifting west, and Marco's track is a little strange with the 11 a.m. update. Good afternoon, everybody. Tracking the Tropics host Daisy Ruth here, and I'm joined by Max Defender 8 meteorologist Amanda Hawley and friend of the program and WKRG Chief Meteorologist Ed Bloodsworth. Ed, thank you so much for being here. I know you were on the program yesterday, and we appreciate you. So, Amanda, we just received this 11 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center for both of these tropical storms. What can you tell us?
Well, we'll start out with Tropical Storm Laura. Of course, all eyes kind of have been on this system with if you are in the eastern portions of the Gulf of Mexico, because we were originally thinking that Florida may be impacted by this storm, but actually with the 11 a.m. advisory and the trends yesterday, it continues to track farther west. So this looks more like a central and western portion of the Gulf of Mexico impact. But as of the 11 a.m. advisory, Laura still remains pretty disorganized. You can see that red there. Those are showers and thunderstorms near the center, and you can see it is moving over islands at this point, which is going to continue to hinder that development as we go into Saturday, today, the rest of today, Sunday, and into Monday. So right over Hispaniola, right over Cuba, both very mountainous islands, and that's really going to limit that development as we go into Monday. Again, we just got this track in from the National Hurricane Center just a few minutes ago. After it emerges into the Gulf of Mexico, it's first going to emerge into the Florida Straits there sometime Monday evening, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. After that, conditions are going to be a lot more conducive for strengthening, and the official forecast does have it strengthening into a Category 1 storm. And check that track out. Now, we have seen over the past 24 hours a pretty large shift west, and that is thanks to the models coming into a little bit better of an agreement on a more westerly track. So now we're looking at potentially impacts to portions of Alabama, Louisiana, and even into Texas. And this timing here is key. Kind of slowed down a little bit. We're looking at maybe Wednesday and into Thursday time frame. We are going to have to watch the intensity strength of that forecast for sure, because it will be in the Gulf of Mexico, and those Gulf waters are very warm. We'll be talking about some lower wind shear as well. So a pretty good environment for that strengthening. Doesn't look like it will spend too much time out in the Gulf of Mexico. It's not going to stall out, but those waters are warm, and as we have seen before, those storms can strengthen pretty fast. Ed, you know, I'm going to bring you in here because a couple days ago we were talking about a Florida impact, then we were talking about potentially, you know, your area where you're at in Mobile, Alabama impact, and now we're looking at an even farther shift west. The models here this morning, they still are spread, but they do continue to trend west.
Back to when the storm was over the Leeward Islands and when it was over the U.S. Virgin Islands, there really wasn't as well-defined center as you would like to see with these tropical cyclones, and that makes forecasting them very difficult. Models start off with a central point, and when you don't have a clearly defined central point, well, then the models kind of go all over the place, and there's a large degree of uncertainty. But as you mentioned, yesterday morning, the center of this forecast cone was right over Mobile Bay, right over in my neighborhood, and now it has shifted significantly farther west, and that's been a trend. Also, I do believe that the high that's guiding this system off to the north is a little bit stronger than anticipated, and the weakness in that trough is going to be a little bit less. But I'm glad you just pulled that up, the forecast models, because you know there is sort of that one little concentrated group over coastal Louisiana. But still note, even now, with these shifts to the west, there is still, I would argue, a very high degree of uncertainty with this track, because we really don't know exactly what kind of shape this storm is going to be in after it passes over Hispaniola and Cuba. You mentioned there, Hispaniola has a peak that's over 10,000 feet, and they call it a hurricane shredder for a reason. So, you know, personally, I'm not entirely convinced this is going to be as strong of a tropical storm as it emerges into the Gulf. At the same time, we know what happens when storms get into the Gulf, and after it moves in, conditions are going to be, in a good word, pristine for this thing to strengthen. Not only do you have those very warm waters, but in the upper levels, you'll have a big area of high pressure, which will allow the storm to breathe and vent And again, we could potentially see some fairly significant or quick strengthening in the Gulf of Mexico when this moves in next week.
Yeah, the National Hurricane Center continues to talk about, several swirls near the center of Laura and Marco as of the 11 a.m. Both of their discussions talk about kind of multiple centers and how they may be reforming. I think that that's definitely a possibility with Laura over the next few days as it moves over Hispaniola and then over Cuba. If we see that center form a little farther to the north, that track will shift a little farther to the east and vice versa. If it forms farther to the south, we'll see the track shift farther west. So something we're going to have to keep an eye on for sure. All right, let's talk about.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, just to add there, but that's another thing why I would urge our viewers to just keep in mind that you look at these forecast tracks. There's still going to be a good bit of variability over the next 24 to 48 hours because there's, again, as you mentioned, a lot of uncertainties as to exactly how much land interaction these systems will face. But you're pulling up Marco, and I'll tell you what, this storm is looking much more impressive than it was just 24 hours ago, and the strength is showing that.
Yeah, the discussion yesterday from the National Hurricane Center was talking about how they were kind of surprised it hadn't organized a little bit sooner because the conditions down there, not bad for strengthening. I mean, we've got warm waters, there's light winds, so it's finally tapping into those resources, like you said. And the track takes this, kind of brushes the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula there, and pretty quickly now, the recent update strengthens it into a hurricane pretty quickly after it emerges into the Gulf of Mexico. Hopefully we'll get the graphics to advance here. There we go. And it's expected to stay a Category 1 now all the way through Monday. After this, though, it's expected to weaken, and there's a very important reason why this one is expected to weaken as it kind of curves off to the west, and that's because we're going to see some pretty significant wind shear from the southwest. So that's going to help to weaken the storm before it makes landfall. Good news for those folks in Texas, because they could be looking at a double whammy come this time next week, or come Tuesday, Wednesday, and into Thursday. So something we'll have to watch for sure as we head into next week.
Yeah, and I think something to note here with this latest track from Marco, the forward speed has picked up a little bit here. So you have this approaching as a Category 1 storm, the Louisiana Gulf Coast, by Monday morning. And then it makes that turn off to the west. Now, if you were to extrapolate this and combine this with Laura's forecast track, just note how, one, rough the Gulf is going to be starting Sunday when this system starts to move into the Gulf. And now you're going to be talking about a prolonged stretch, especially for the folks on the Louisiana Gulf Coast. You could potentially be seeing a good bit of rain, high wave impact, coastal flooding. As a result, even if the storm remains offshore of coastal Louisiana, that would happen Monday and into early Tuesday. And then by Wednesday, talking about a potential landfall from Laura. So as you mentioned, a 1-2 punch potentially for Louisiana, but I mean, you look at those models there, it's going to be, there's still a lot of variability, but I'm glad you pull up the winds here because you can clearly see that high shear developing.
Yeah, those bright pink colors that you see kind of on the western edge of the Gulf of Mexico, that's the upper level winds, and they are forecast to be very strong. So up until Monday, we'll see pretty favorable conditions for that strengthening. But then as soon as we get into Monday and the rest of the week, those winds are going to be right there, and it's going to be battling that wind shear as we go into Tuesday, Wednesday, and into Thursday. So that's why this storm will likely weaken before it makes landfall. But when we talk about Laura, that same situation is not the case because those winds will kind of be moving over Texas at that point, and the Gulf of Mexico will be fair game. So here are both of the tracks, and we've seen all of these all over social media over the past couple of days, but I've put an important pause here, and this is 8 p.m. on Monday. You note the location of both of the storms. Earlier in the week, we were talking about the potential for 2 tropical systems in the Gulf of Mexico at the same time. That's still definitely a possibility here, but note where Marco is in the northern portions of the Gulf of Mexico, kind of just off the coast of Louisiana there, whereas Laura is just emerging off the coast of Cuba and making its way into the Gulf of Mexico. So we're not talking about these storms overlapping at this point because after I advance this graphic, you're going to see the cones overlap, but they get really confusing because they're not going to be in the same place at the same time. So definitely the timing here has changed a little bit and something we're going to continue to watch because As Marco moves into the coast of Texas potentially and weakens, again, the conditions become a little bit more favorable for Laura and opens up in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's why we see Laura's forecast to become a Category 1, potentially, in my opinion, even stronger than that.
Yeah, I really do. I think models generally don't do very well with intensity forecasting. You know, we've become fairly good with track forecasting. They've been proven that over the last decade or two. But intensity forecasting is a lot to be desired because, as we've seen, we actually saw it with Hurricane Hannah just a couple of weeks ago when it moved into Texas. Really, no model had that becoming a strong Cat 1, borderline Cat 2 when it came in, and it was just able to really take advantage of this of the pristine environment. And Laura, I'll say, could very well do the same thing as it moves through the Gulf. And for that fact, Marco, I think Marco, on its current trend, could easily become a hurricane by this evening or overnight. And then you could be talking about a strong Cat 1 moving through the southern Gulf of Mexico. So, but if these two storms make it there, that would be a little bit of history. This two named storms in the Gulf. Last time that happened, you have to go back to 1959 from Tropical Storm Beulah and a third unnamed storm. But now, looking at that timing, it's less likely we're going to have two hurricanes in the Gulf at the same time. And that's never happened on record here. So a little bit of history and then a little bit of history avoided as well. But bottom line with this, Daisy and Amanda, everyone on the Gulf Coast, I would still even say Northwest Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. I know it's a lot of states. It's a lot of real estate on the Gulf Coast. But we could start seeing some impacts beginning as early as late Sunday, and then certainly as we head towards Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe.
Yeah, that timing there, important to note. And we could see changes with this going into the rest of the weekend and into early next week. Still plenty of time to prepare. These storms are far out, neither of them in the Gulf of Mexico yet. I would say that the Tampa Bay area, as of yesterday, and the trends continue this morning, we are looking like a little more in the clear. I think we're going to have a breezy day on Monday, potentially lingering into Tuesday morning. But as Ed said, if you're in the northwestern portions of Florida, the Panhandle there, and everywhere else along the Gulf Coast, definitely pay attention to these two storms because you'll likely, at the very, very least, be getting some rain bands moving through your area. And, you know, if you don't this time, we're not done yet, guys. We've still got the rest of August and all of September, as well as October, to go through of hurricane season, where we typically see some of the strongest storms. So these right now only forecast to get to a Category 1, something that, you know, we're going to continue to watch for sure as we go into the next week. But, you know, we've got a long ways to go of hurricane season yet for even stronger storms to form.
WKRG Chief Meteorologist Ed Bloodsworth and our Max Defender 8 meteorologist Amanda Hawley here. And Amanda, you basically answered my only question that I had for you folks of what you would tell viewers moving forward. And you are absolutely right. Peak hurricane season is September 10th, I believe.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, folks, these meteorologists are working very hard to cover and track both of these tropical storms. So we're going to let them go here. Ed, we really appreciate you being here on the program. Friend of the channel, friend of the program, we really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, folks, very informative stream. So for Chief Meteorologist at WKRG, Ed Bloodsworth, and Max Defender 8 Meteorologist Amanda Hawley, I've been Daisy Ruth. Thank you guys so much for watching.